Okay, well, let's get going here. We're going to look at the SmartBuild release 1.85, and let's see, I'm going to share my entire screen here so I don't have to mess around with some of that stuff. Okay, Mark, can you confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Okay, so this is SmartBuild 1.85. You will notice I am on the beta site. So this has not been released out to the wild yet. We plan to release this evening. That is the current plan. We're going to see how things go. We're doing some testing still and working through things, or just making sure that we have enough testing. So we're looking to release this evening. It might be possibly Friday evening, or Monday evening, but in the next few days we'll get this released. So I'm going to be using this beta site. You won't see these features until we do release. And I'm going to go over pretty quickly just all the new stuff in here. I'm going to try to show you basically how it works. We're not going to get too in depth, or at least I'm not here. But again, at the end, we'll open it up if you need to see more. If something doesn't make sense, just let us know. We can go into anything that you want to go into. So the first new thing that we'll look at here, since we're right here, is we added this job viewer link to the home page and also to the jobs page. And so if you haven't seen this before, if you just click on this, it's going to copy a web URL, and that's going to be a view only of the model for whichever one of these you click on. So you can send this to a customer, or if you just want to get a quick view of this, though, yeah, we're going to do something about that in the future, but you can just copy this. You can go into a browser and you can put that in as the web address, and it's going to take you to a view only of this model. And you could send this to a customer and then kind of come in here and look around and browse around, and they can do a few things, but they can't change anything. So that job viewer link has been added to both this job list and on the home page, just to make it a little easier to grab that. And we got a few other things coming up with that in our next release related to the e-modeler to make it a little easier to view, and as part of some auto responses to your potential customers. Okay, so quite a few things here. Again, this one has quite a few things going on in the settings and the setup. So what I'm going to do is, just so we're not jumping back and forth, go through multiple things here in the settings, and then we'll go back into a model and kind of see how those things work once we get into the job or the model. And the first thing maybe I'll go into are some new things here with the packages. So we use these packages to calculate materials that aren't shown in the 3D model. And we have this main category here, and that just refers to the main building, but we also have all the different types of openings. So you can set up these material calculation packages for specific types of openings. And a couple new things that we did here. I'm just going to go into this overhead door, which I set up, just kind of an example here that we can look at. So this is just a very basic overhead door package that I have some labor and some extra framing in here, that whenever I turn this on in a job, it's going to give me this additional labor and this additional framing. If we go into this labor item, the thing that's new here for all of these openings, the overhead, the walkdoor, and the sliders, is you can use this catalog category now. So before, it was putting all this information underneath the door and window tab. So anything that you did for these opening packages is going to show up underneath the opening tab. And we'll see that when we get into a job. Now you can choose where you put this. So you can see here that I have this labor. I wanted this to go into the labor category. I don't want it to show up underneath my overhead door. I want to list out all my labor separately underneath the labor package. So I put this into that category, and that's always been there for the main, and now we just have those for these openings. The other thing that we've done here, let's see, where did okay, yeah, I did it right here. The other thing that we've added specifically for these openings is you can now use any of the job questions, any of the job data to calculate any of these packages for the openings. We had this for the main always, but we didn't have it for the openings. With the openings, you were limited to things that were very specific to openings, like lineal footage of the overhead door, or like the width of the overhead door, the square footage. Now, if you create these calculations, you can go in and use any of these calculations that we have available for the job. You can use those to calculate and create your packages for the openings as well. So I just did an example here for this labor. I just did a jam post times 100, and so this is just kind of an example, but this one here will show the two new things, this category, and then you can use any of these job questions now to calculate your overhead door, your slider, or your walk door packages. So I just set up this one here as an example, and we'll take a look at those coming up in a second. So that is the packages. Couple things here in the setup wizard for a few new material items. One, and this is pretty specific, but it may be useful to some of you, maybe not. You can just ignore it if you don't need to use this, but we do have the ability to do tapered columns now, and we'll see what these look like in a job. But I set up an example here for a tapered column. So I entered in just kind of a generic tapered column. And the thing that's new about this is there's a minimum depth here for this framing member. And in this case, it's a post or a column. And the minimum depth is going to be the bottom of this tapered column. And it's going to taper up to this depth. The width is still fixed. Nothing's changed with the width. It's just not like a tapered column on both sides at this point. This is going to be tapered, from the outside to the inside of the building, and you'll see that. But if you do want to set this up, you just come in here. You can set a minimum depth. That's going to be at the base of the column, and then it's going to taper out to this depth that you put in here. And we'll take a look at that quickly when we get into a job. I guess last time we did talk about the bar joist. We're going to look at a couple things with the bar joist, and they're this web header shape. Yeah, we took a look at that last time, so I'm not going to get into that. Let's see, what else do we want to get into here? Yeah, one other thing here that we'll talk about quickly, which I actually really haven't even set up here, but and I don't know if this will come up or not, but last time we talked about this maximum length for our panels, like your sheathing panels or any type of sheathing, really any type of panel, where, if you reach that maximum length on a really long roof, it's going to cut off the panel at that length, and then it'll do an underlap and start a new panel. So you could have a maximum length there where you never get a length over whatever you enter for this maximum. We now also have this minimum cut length, so you can put in inches this minimum. If you have a job with maybe hips or different things and you have a panel that is less than this minimum length, you're just going to round it up to that minimum length, and it's going to round it up on your material list. So if you have a 1 foot minimum cut length and you have a 6-inch piece, it's going to round it up to 1 foot. And basically, it's just going to treat it like you have a 1 foot panel. If you have a whole bunch of short pieces, it's going to round them all up to the 1 foot. And it's going to show those and price those as 1 foot on all of your outputs, material, the pricing, your layouts, your sheathing drawings, and that kind of thing. So you can't set up a minimum length. They're just going to round that up and just treat it like it's at that minimum length. I'm not going to set that up here, but that is a new feature that's available. Okay. I guess one last thing, and again, this is kind of specific, but in case you want to use it, let's see here. How did I put this in? Hopefully, okay, yeah. So we can do this keystone truss is what we're calling it here. And just to show you, we'll get into the model, but if you're using parallel cord trusses, you can set a flat bottom, like the middle section of the parallel cord truss to come in with this keystone truss. And you'll see what this looks like when we get into the job. And you may know what I'm talking about or maybe not, but we'll take a look at it. But if you do want to use this, you just come in here. There's a new field here called the keystone width. And basically, if it matches this truss and you have a keystone width and you're using the parallel cord truss, it is specific to parallel cord, then you're going to get whatever width you put in here for this flat middle section for the keystone width. And you'll see what that looks like here in a little bit, but if you are interested in that, that is where that gets set up. Okay. I think that's maybe everything that we want to look at here in the settings. So a few things on the opening packages, a couple things there with the minimum length and that tapered column, and then we have the keystone truss that I'm all doing some setup in here. I'm going to go back to my home page, and I have a job here that I started for the webinar. And so as this loads up, so here's a model that I just kind of created. And the first thing that I'll do here is we'll take a look at how those package changes work, and also a new feature here for all the door openings. I'm going to do an overhead because that's where I had those packages. I'm going to do a custom opening here. And so one new feature here is we have the sill height for the openings now. And the way that we've set this up is that for the openings, you can put in a sill height, and it's going to put that put the bottom of the opening at that sill height, as opposed to the header height for the windows. We're doing a sill height. It'll just give you the bottom of this opening. We can, do some changes to that. If that doesn't really make sense to you, or if you want to see something else, let us know. But that's how we have this set up right now. So when I put in this 10-foot sill height, as you can see, it's going to put this 10 foot from grade. And so I'm just going to click here, and we'll just place this custom opening here. So now you can place any of these doors up on the wall anywhere that you want to. So I just put in this custom opening. While it's a little fresh, we'll jump in here and look at these packages. Now, one thing that I forgot to do, that we can just go back in here and edit, and I'm going to click back on this. I do not have this overhead door coming in specifically. So this is the packages we were looking at in the settings, and here's that overhead door package. I'm going to turn this one off. I have that automatically turned on, and then I'm going to come in and turn this one on. So we'll update that, and then we'll take a look at the material list. So if we go to the door and window, here's this overhead that I just put in. Here's that extra framing that I had. I just have two 10-foot 2x6 per overhead door. So that's just coming in here now, and that is coming in under the door and windows tab underneath the actual opening itself. And then if you remember that other item underneath that package was this labor, which now we're able to put into the labor category. So even though this is part of that overhead door package, we can list out this line item here underneath the labor tab. And so that's true of any type of material. You can put it under any of these tabs. So you could have door and window packages that have some things underneath the door and window, and then other things in accessories and labor and trusses. And I'll take this as an opportunity. I know every time we have a webinar, we get requests to be able to do some customization of these. We do have that on the list, and that will be coming up. Probably not next time, but probably the next release. So that is coming up, and we can talk about that some more. But this is just a good opportunity to kind of let you know that we are working on that. Okay, so that's how those door and window packages, you can now place those anywhere you want. And also, this is using the number of jam posts. I had, number of jam posts times 100. Right now we just have the 2 jam posts because I only have jam posts on this one overhead door. So I'm getting a quantity of 200 here. That's just the way I had my calculation set up. So you can use those new job questions and you can put these wherever you want for those. And you can place these openings above grade wherever you want. Okay. So one thing to notice here on these openings above grade, it is going to use the window post framing sill settings for the bottom of this. Let us know. We can work out a different solution. This is just how we did it here. So you can see I have this trough 2-ply. That's what's happening here down at the bottom as my sill. But we could change that to something else. If I change this to a girt, it's going to change up this sill style. So now it just runs this girt across the front. So you can manipulate the bottom of these using the window post frame settings. And of course, what you have to be careful of is when you do this here on these main tabs, it is going to change all your windows. So what you can do is you can go into advanced edit if you need to for these, and you can go into each individual opening and come in here, go to the door and window. You would have to go to the window post frame, and if we do want something like a trough, for our sill here or something, we can change it for just this one opening. So we'll probably need to do something to make this a little more convenient, but now we have just the trough opening here for this one door, but we still have our girt sill for our windows. So you can manipulate that. That's how that works at this point. If you have feedback on that, let us know. If that's turning into a real pain, we can come up with a better solution. Okay. So let's maybe real quickly, I don't want to get into this too much because this is pretty specific, but here is this tapered column. So for the post material, I have the tapered column we looked at here down at the bottom. If we do change this, so our post material is using that tapered column, you can see what it looks like. I would need to do some adjustment here. Like I probably don't want it starting below ground. I would move the bottom of the base up to here, and we could do that by going into the foundation and changing some settings. I'm not going to get into it too much, but just so you see what this looks like, it's using that bar joist shape, and it's tapering from the 6 inches up to 24 inches here. So it's kind of just a generic taper, just linear. taper. But if you do want to get that kind of look, and usually it's going to be like a steel kind of member, and you can have this come in as like an LVL or something if that's something that you maybe would do, but I just have this set up with the web header. So that's what that kind of looks like. I'm going to go back to this, and then I'll show you these keystone trusses as well real quick, just so you can see what they look like. I do have these parallel core trusses right now for this job. Underneath the roof framing here, here's the parallel core truss. And that particular truss that we looked at, I believe if I just change this to an 80-foot wide building, it's going to find that truss we looked at that I put in the keystone length of 15 foot. And so now you can see what it does is it puts in this keystone truss where it's kind of maybe hard to tell here, but you know, there's a flat keystone section here in the middle that's 15 foot from the peak, or it's a total length of 15 foot centered on the peak. So we have our parallel cord truss coming up, and then it runs into this keystone, and then it keeps going across and then comes back down. So probably again a kind of a steel truss thing mostly, but we do have that ability now to use that keystone truss if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, so another item here, I guess we didn't really get into this. This would be something as part of your settings, or at least something you'd have to go into your outputs. We do have some new document tokens, and they're all related to any sort of options or bundles that you have, which are going to be up here. And so with these options and bundles, you can set these up. I have some different types of insulation here for walls and roofs, and then just kind of, you know, a workbench and some gutters that I have set up with these options and bundles. And if you haven't seen these before, the way these work is if it's an option, I have packages set up, like I have this kind of double bubble material in my inventory, and I have a calculation based on the square footage of the roof in this case, and a certain price. And when it's an option, it'll just kind of list these out here. Like if you wanted to add this insulation double bubble, this is how much it's going to cost for this job. If you want to do the reflective, it's going to cost this much. And you can list these out on like a proposal or a quote, and then people can opt into these. And then if you turn these from an option to a bundle, like I'll make this double bubble insulation for the roof a bundle, and that means it's actually adding this to the job. And if we went and looked, you would see that like we have this double bubble, and anything else that you have in this particular package, it's now on this material list. It's not just listed out as a price with a bundle, it actually added those materials. It keeps it bundled up here so that you get a total price, but then there's a bunch of materials potentially spread out on the material list. And the thing that's new here, these are not new, these have been around a long time. But what you can do now is on the document templates, we have some new tokens. And so I went in into the settings, into the outputs, and you can download the latest list of tokens. And I just deleted out everything except for these new tokens that are related to the options and bundles. And so what it's going to do, it's going to take all of the options and bundles that you have set up, and it's going to give you a token for those. So you can see here's that option, insulation roof double bubble. Here's the bundle version. So you're going to get one for both the option and the bundle. And I'll show you what this looks like here in a second. We'll output it for the job. These are the raw tokens that you can use. So you can set up a document and format it and, you know, do all. You could put your logo, and it could be part of your sales proposal or quote, and you could put these where you want them. So this just gives you a little more flexibility. We did have an option list token, I think. It just kind of lists out all your options with the price. Now you have a lot more flexibility about where you put these. You could have different sections for gutters and a section for insulation. And so I'm going to save this job, and then I'll do an output of that, and you can see what we end up with here. So these other ones I've left as options. That's what these mean. And then this is the one double bubble we turned into a bundle. So if I hit the outputs here, and then I put this one at the top, and then if we download, so I took this particular template and uploaded that, and that's what we have here. And so you can see that I just uploaded this exactly. So this particular one that we turned into a bundle for the insulation, it's coming in with the name of that, and it's giving you the price for that particular bundle. The option version of this is just blank because I moved it to a bundle. There is no option right now in this particular job for the double bubble. I turned it into a bundle. You can see the rest of these, they're all set up still as the option, and then the bundle's blank. So depending on how you have that toggled in the job as an option or a bundle, you're going to get the price, you're going to get it listed out here in these tokens. So a lot of different ways you could use those. You can just spread those out within your quotes, however it makes sense for you. So new tokens there that you can use. There's one thing, I guess really related sort of to these keystone trusses, to the webbed headers or the bar joist shapes that we looked at last time, and also these tapered columns with those shapes, and the colors of, like I have my skirt board here, this different color. We now, when you can output these, all those kind of things should be coming through on all the outputs, including the SketchUp output, and the cross sections, and any of those visual type of outputs. You will now get those actual bar joist, webbed header, those tapered columns. Those will come through. I think the SketchUp one's probably the big one. So now those all come through on those outputs, which previously those were not kind of part of all those outputs you could do. So that's another new thing that's part of this release if you want to take advantage of that. Okay, a few more things here. One, yeah, I guess maybe the last thing here in the job, we are laying these panels out a little bit differently. And this is a pretty simple example, but maybe I'm going to output, let's see, how did I do these roof? Okay, so this roof layout with panels. This layout's going to show the actual panel layout here. It's just easier to see this way. So I'm going to just download that output. And you can see that these panels are lining up on the opposite sides of the roof. They kind of just mirror each other. You may or may not have noticed before, but this is different than how we previously have done this. We would lay out one side and then basically it'd start over here and then run it out this way, so that these weren't really mirrored. They didn't line up. They'd be offset a little bit just depending on the layout. Sometimes it'd work out and sometimes it wouldn't. Now basically anytime it can do this kind of a mirror, it's not always possible depending on the situation, it's going to try to mirror these and line these up. So that is moving forward the way that things are going to work in this particular release. So you might need to do some adjustments or something for those, or hopefully that just works out. It's just a better layout for you. if you have feedback on that, let us know. We can talk about that coming up here in a second. Um, yeah, I think the only other thing that, just in case people want to see this, we have a new report here on the job list page, this job list report. And if you click on that, you can put in a date range. If you leave it blank, that's going to give you the month to the date, so the first to today, I think. And so this is going to take this job list kind of information, and I'll just show you real quick in case you want to use this. These are all the jobs since the beginning of July that I've done in this beta system. And so it's going to give you the job name, who created it, and what distributor or builder it's on, and the status, and all these dates, and the original price. And it is going to give you information like, this job information, the loading, the length, and overhang. So all the information for these jobs is in here. So just a lot of data. And if this is, there's different ways that you could slice and dice this data for a lot of different purposes. But just FYI, now there is this job output report that's going to give you this kind of information for your job list and for the job data. Okay, I think that is everything for this release. I guess one thing I want to mention, which I know if Keith was here, he would mention this. We are working on the interior wall input. We do anticipate that to be with the next release. So you'll be able to input multiple interior walls. It's going to be a work in progress, but we hope by next time you'll be able to easily input interior walls, and it's going to be done through the 2D mode. So you're going to go into the 2D view, and right now you can come in and you can put in openings through this 2D view, but we're going to use the same area here to be able to input interior walls, or you can just draw them and input lengths and move things around. And so you can easily create like an interior layout here. It's going to be a first step. We're going to continue on this. It's going to be part of the barn dominiums. We'll keep making progress on this, but you should see interior wall input coming out next time. The other thing that I was going to mention here is we are working on a replacement for these document templates. I know there's been some changes to the way Word does things, and some different browser changes that have caused some issues with some of the formatting of our document templates. We're working on a replacement of that, and that should be coming out also with the next release. It should avoid all those problems. I think we've kind of cleaned that up, but it does cause problems at times, but that's something we're gonna clean up. Okay, so that's pretty much everything that I wanted to go through for this 1.85 release. Mark or Paul, if there's anything that you want to add here. I think, Paul, you had something, if you're able to get your audio. Are you out there, Paul?
Yeah, I'm out here. What was my thing?
Something with the mirroring of the panels, if it's a job in a new status.
I want to let everybody know, because we've made that alignment now going across the roof, and both sides will be the same. It does it with hipped roofs and valleys, and so the short pieces that used to run in different directions you would get different sizes. Now we're making those lines line up across the valley lines and the hip lines. The pricing will change based on the size of those panels. I just want you to be aware that, older jobs that you're going to pull up that are still in the new status are going to change pricing. So kind of expect that, but that's where to look. And also, if you're using that minimum panel length, that will change prices too, because you're going to get prices instead of a 1 foot piece pricing, you'll get, I'll say, a 3 foot piece pricing if that's your minimum length you can roll on your machines, just so everybody knows.
Okay. Yeah. So for that mirror, the pricing shouldn't be significantly, I mean, hugely different. You're just going to have some different lengths on some of those panels that you did than you did previously because of the way it just gets laid out.
Yeah. On larger
Okay.
jobs and more hips and you know, those changes, you'll notice a larger price difference, and just verify that that is the reason why whenever you're going through.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Mark, do you have anything or anything come through the comments? I mean, basically at this point we can open it up. If you want to unmute, you can ask questions or you can send them in through the chat and we can just go through and discuss whatever you want. Anything on the chat that came in?
No, just somebody was having trouble with their audio. All right. So a question from Kelsey: could we get some outputs added? Collada, FBX, and OBJ. Collada is a CAD application. I don't know what an FBX is. We can certainly talk about it. It is quite a fair bit of work to create an output. So the SketchUp output that we create, for instance, there's a library we had to purchase from SketchUp in order to be able to create those files. So there's a lot of work involved in generating an output that can be loaded by a third-party CAD program. So yes, we could do that. It's a question of how many people would benefit from it and how much work would it take to do it. So, but certainly something that I haven't heard anybody ask for those. Now I have, so we will put those on the list.
Those three? FBX, Collada, and what was the last one?
OBJ.
Oh, OBJ. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, a little bit more discussion about what do you mean by outputting to an OBJ. OBJ is rather broad specification. What application do you want to be able to take that OBJ and open it? So just some more discussion, Kelsey. Yeah, so I think if you want to, schedule a meeting between our support guys and your IT guys, we can certainly do that. It's probably worthy of a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, anything else? Kind of quiet today.
Steve says, can we get a main building tab for the add-ons tab? Very seldom is our add-on the same as the main building.
So for like the options and bundles and the add-ons specifically for attached buildings. Yeah, I think that might get into the rooms eventually.
Yeah, so let's see if we can first understand what he's asking for.
I mean, I think what he's asking for is, we have these packages, but they're not specific to an attached building. Like you might want to put in a porch, but you want to have like a porch list of add-ons, and they're going to be different than these add-ons that you have for the main building, I believe, but you can clarify. That's how I interpret that.
This is Chris. I think he's referring to the details, like the framing details. So when you have an open wall, and I think you covered a decent amount of that with the open wall truss carrier setting, and we had open wall post frame, like posts spaces and all that. I'm trying to think what other areas that would be, the framing would be different. So take ceiling for an example, and this might come down to rooms, but you want to do ceiling in the porch, and you want to put purlins in that. In the main building, we don't have purlins. That's something that has to be done in advanced edit. So if there could be details, basically more details added to the add attached building interface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So you'd be kind of have some of these settings here as part of these attached buildings.
Well, if can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like we've done buildings before where the main building gets a foundation and then the add-on would get post frame. Well, then we have to go in and like advanced edit and edit all those the 3 walls, but to edit it to make
that is a new feature in this output or in this version. So we do have that as a default. We will put posts on the attached buildings, open walls. So that is going to be the default if no matter what you have for your main building wall frame.
Well, what about
so that's next release, just to be clear.
Oh, yeah.
That's in the future. So that'd be like if you had a stud frame main building and you put on a porch, it's going to automatically make that a post frame porch.
What about attached building?
But
Like,
yeah,
would the attached building automatically go post frame as well? But
not if it's closed. We are doing that with
Right.
open wall buildings.
I'm talking about like attached buildings is what we usually have to go in and modify all the walls. Is
Yeah, that's what
Like
I'm
if the
talking
ma-
about, an attached building.
Yeah.
Are you saying if it's open or closed, you go in there and modify that, or?
Well, most of our attached buildings are closed, or like one guy, you might want a shop and lined and then have cold storage. Well, then we have to go and modify the attached building. That's how we usually figure it. We usually do a main building and then attach the cold storage onto the end of it. Well, it wants to go in and line everything. You don't have the option of, that part being lined or not lined. It just, if you have it clicked on the main package, it just lines everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, if we could make a tab where if we hit the attached building tab, like we would have those options, the same options of lining it and everything like that as we would in the main building tab.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically across main building details, door and window, you'd say attached buildings. And then whenever you come in to create attached buildings, there'd be default answers.
Yeah, like you could do the same options that you would on the main building tab, I guess. I didn't know how hard that would be.
That's kind of going to our rooms features that we're working on. Isn't that correct? Is that what you get out of that, Sean?
yeah. I mean, this is something we've wanted to do for a long time. In one of the things, if you do have settings for each attached building, you just end up with a lot of data, just a lot more data, which is not the end of the world, but it's just one of those things that's a bit of a challenge for us. And the other thing is, we have these idea of wings and rooms where we do want to have a whole list of settings and also like packages, different calculations and different things for each of the wings or the rooms or, whatever we call them, or kind of a combination of both. So it's something we've had on our radar that we want to do, but it's just like, how do we manage all this data and how do we do that in a way that makes sense with the rooms. So I think about that as being kind of part of the barndominium push. And so we're going to have a solution for that coming up, but it is just kind of, it's a little bit complicated, but I definitely, we hear what you're saying on that. It makes sense that you have different types of buildings and they have different types of materials and settings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for example, on the barn minimum, if you have your house part want to be stud framed and then he wants the garage part as a post frame, then it would figure you'd have to go in there and like update all the walls in advanced edit, I guess.
Yeah, you have to go into advanced edit and individually each wall. Yep. Yeah, so we definitely want to find a way to make that easier and have settings for those kind of things.
Well, one thing we could do, because we have this setting now for open wall framing. If you click on advanced here, we have roof framing as an option here on an attached building. So you can change it easily from trusses to rafters. What we don't have is anything in here that says, what's the wall framing? So if we had right up at the top, along with roof framing, we had wall framing, and you could change your wall framing from post to stud without even going into advanced. I think that would address one of the requests that you had is I've got this post frame building and I want to put a wing on it that's stud frame. So I've got a warehouse and I'm going to add an office to the side and I want to stud frame the office. So if you had the ability to put in that attached building and say the walls are enclosed and the wall framing is stud frame, it would default to whatever your main building is, but and then the roof framing is trusses, the roof orientation is standard, all of that stuff. Same settings you have, but just one more, which would be, all right, what's my wall framing?
Yeah, I mean that would help. It's not a final solution, sounds like.
Well, it's not a full solution. It would help that particular use case, which is when I add this attached building, I want it to be stud frame.
Yeah.
Which seems like it's pretty common. And it's low hanging fruit. We don't have to bash our head against the wall looking at all the idiosyncrasies of packages and all the other stuff.
Right.
And one of the big problems with ceilings is ceilings are part of the roof. And if the roof gets combined with the main roof, then either the whole roof has a ceiling or it doesn't. And we don't want that. So ceilings is a different problem. And our intent, as Paul mentioned, is the concept of rooms, where now that you've put in all the walls for your building, we know where all the rooms are. And so you can click on an individual room and say, I want to set some properties for this. Like this room has liner and ceiling, and it has a 6-inch slab. This other room over here doesn't have liner, but has an 8-inch slab. And maybe it has ceiling or maybe it doesn't have ceiling. This porch has ceiling, doesn't have liner, but it does have ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the full solution.
And then the add-on to that is Ivan's question is there an option for ceiling joists in a porch or lean-to? There is not right now. If you put in a porch or a lean-to and you have rafters as your framing and you turn on the ceiling is going to go up against the bottom of those rafters. It's going to be angled.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out where you tell us that you want a ceiling, how you tell us that you want flat ceiling joists on your attached building. Same thing happens if you do a gable building with rafters and you put ceiling. The ceiling joists go up against the bottom of those rafters. So I think there needs to be somehow a setting that says, no, I have flat ceiling.
Yeah.
Which is going to generate ceiling joists and then the sheathing on the bottom of those ceiling joists. So.
Yeah, that's an enhancement.
It's on the list.
that has been in the
Yep.
backlog for a while. We've definitely
Yeah.
discussed that. The other thing I want to mention about adding in all those rooms and all the different features is that there has to be a trade-off between performance and more stuff in the building. We've already, we've done some good cleanups in performance, but if more stuff gets added like that, it will slow it down again. So that's one of the trade-offs that we got to worry about too.
Yes.
Yeah, because certainly a building like this one with 4 walls, that's relatively simple. As soon as you put a dozen divider walls in there, interior walls inside of that building, now you have quadrupled the number of walls that have to be framed, that have to be processed. And it is going to make it slower to process a more complicated building. And so we need to look at ways that we can increase the performance of the application as you're using it. Okay.
I've got a list of items that I want to just discuss or bring to your attention. Can we add change the system where the add miscellaneous and add catalog materials in the job review? Can we change it to where it doesn't refresh after every additional item? Like if I wanted to add half a dozen different materials, I could add them all and then hit the refresh instead of fooling between every item.
Yes, we could. One of the reasons that we do that is because we have to go to the server to find out how much that thing costs that you just added, so we can calculate the total price. But we could change the behavior so that it. So there's this delay slider over here where Sean's got it set to 21 seconds, and that means any change you make to the model is going to wait 21 seconds before it actually calls the server, and you have to look at the spinner. But there are certain things that you do that get processed right away. So
Sure.
if you add an attached building, it happens right away. And it does that because, well, if you added a bunch of attached buildings, what are you really getting there? But adding miscellaneous or adding catalog on these lists, or even editing an individual one or deleting one, I think we could change the behavior so that it doesn't automatically refresh when you do those.
I think that would be very, very beneficial, save a lot of time. Now, I'm not adding a lot of material, but there's stuff you can't do packages for, like say he needs extra grade boards, or he needs, it's unique to that job. If there's always several items on a job, so it'd be nice if that was on that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's relatively easy to do. It's probably not going to mess anybody up. There is the potential that you could add these things to the job and go, hey, it's not changing the price. Well, you need to refresh.
Sure.
Yeah, there's something we do with trusses. Whenever you add a truss on the truss list, if it's an orange truss and you add it into your truss list, we don't refresh at that point. So you could do like your entire trusses, if there's 15 trusses on there, you can just go add, click, add, click, and then hit refresh, and then all of those update at once. So we already do something like that somewhere else in the program.
Sure.
So I do understand the need for that. Trenton had said same thing when adjusting openings on the exterior. That we've tried to ameliorate, I guess if that's the right word, with the 2D drawing. So you can make your adjustments in the 2D and then save all, right? So you can come in and make adjustments to these guys I don't know if you've seen that before.
Yeah. So that the way the 2D mode works is you go into 2D mode and it never goes to the server again until you return back from 2D mode, which is why we don't show you the price and we don't show you the framing, because we don't frame this wall.
Yeah, that's great.
So as far as the doors and windows in the building, this is, we think, a better way to deal with those things. You can add them, you can delete them, you can edit them, and it doesn't do anything until you return back, and then it goes to the server and says, all right, now we calculated and figure all this out. And in fact, it's that 2D mode where we're going to be doing the interior walls as well.
Okay. Another question I had is if you use the header high option on sliding door and window and overhead door openings, which is fairly new, it throws the header to the next standard column instead of containing it to the opening.
Yes, that is by design, because the people who said we need this feature that will do a header high wanted it to go to the next standard column.
Okay. Consider me people that say I need it to stop at the door.
Okay.
So you can go to edit. You should be able to, right? So
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can use the top carrier instead of the header.
yeah.
So right now, if you
Right, the truss carrier has to be done in advanced edit for each individual opening.
Yeah.
Unless we have auto.
Okay.
The
So
truss, I would like for the header high to behave like the truss carrier.
Gotcha. So maybe an option here. Yeah, we probably
header boundaries, but the header boundaries don't affect it. It should. There's an option for next column, which is what it's doing, but I can't.
Yeah, but the header boundaries are for the header, which is that whatever framing goes up at the top of that opening.
Okay.
So that's what controls that. But header high boundaries would be, I think, what you're after.
Sure. Yep. That's right.
And you're basically looking at next column or outside of post, right?
Right.
Okay.
The next column is what we're doing now. Outside of post would be what you're asking for.
We did that going to the next column because people who ask for this don't use the jam posts like you see here. I totally understand why you'd want to stop the header at the jam post, but if you don't use a jam post, it would go all the way across. So we just said use common posts for this because that's where they're going to put their header.
Again, we had one customer who said, here are the specifications for this enhancement we need. So we implemented it and it works great for them. And now you're saying this would work great for me if only.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we will, we can add a header high boundaries, just like the header boundaries.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So let's make sure we get that captured. I don't know who's taking notes here, but
I got it. Yep.
Okay, so.
The next thing I had on my list was, and it came up with that elevated overhead door. Well, if you go, say, a 20-foot wide door on the gable, will it keep the post below the opening? The on-center posts, we'll need on-center posts to continue through that below the opening. And I always have wanted them above the opening too, but that's not happened yet. So.
Yeah, we have some things for the posts.
Yeah, so when you put the door up above, up in the air like that, our assumption is that all the load from that roof is going to come down onto the header for that door, and go to the jam post and get carried down to the ground. So there is no
Correct.
need for a post, a structural post underneath the sill, if you will. But I
We
think
have if the opening is more than 10 feet wide, we would definitely still need a column there for wind load.
right, you need something to support the girts, and it's the same issue above it, right?
That's right.
You know, if you have a 30-foot wide door in the side of your building, and you've got 10 feet above the door to the top of the building, you've got to have something. You got to have some posts in
Right.
there, to support that. Okay.
Okay, yeah, got it. That makes sense.
And would that necessarily be on center with the standard posts, or would you simply,
We typically
if you
do
needed
keep
one,
them on center. Yeah, we would keep them on center. Just basically behave same as the eave posts, which those are sticking there because we have a truss above them. But that's how we typically handle it on a gable as well. Just keep that layout.
okay, even if it resulted in two short posts underneath that sill, really
We
close
would
to the
probably
jam post
we
on
would
either side.
skip that. Yeah, we would probably skip that and just center one under the opening, which could be done in advanced post spacing or custom post spacing.
Yeah. Okay, because we are making some enhancements to the post spacing for, like, this case right here, where, well, this is really a good example. If this opening were shifted a little bit more, so you've got 30 feet, and if you've got, I don't know what your gable post spacing is set up. Can you check that real quick, Paul or Sean?
I think it's 8 or
Go to details. Yeah. Wall framing, post. Yeah, so gable post spacing is 8 feet. And so you've got posts every 8 feet. Well, but you're spacing them evenly. So a minimum of 8 feet. So it's put 3 posts along the side of that gable. And then it left the middle one out. Well, you really probably would have a post centered on each side of that. Where it really comes up is if you look at the back side of the building, Sean, spin it around. This happens a lot. If you put a 10-foot garage door on either side of two 10-foot garage doors on that wall, what it's going to do is it's going to put your garage doors in. It's going to put the headers or the columns for the jam posts for those, and then it's still going to leave that center column in there. Right. And so we're working on some logic to say, look, in that scenario, if the space between two jam posts is less than your spacing, you don't need a standard post there, because the jam posts are sufficient. So this is what we're doing on beta. On the live side, I believe we weren't doing that.
Yeah, it is on the live side. We did that last time.
Oh, okay, never mind then.
Yeah.
So it's similar to that issue though, because what we have here is, you said 8-foot spacing. That means the maximum spacing you want between your posts on the gable is 8 feet, and yet you've got 10 feet between two posts above those openings. So you do need a post there, and I think that goes back to what you were saying, Chris, right? Is that in this scenario you would have a post, and you would center it above each of those openings?
I think so. In most cases, if sometimes we'll keep the layout just so girts run the same length across there. It's not same on every job, but definitely a post.
Yeah. Okay. And then obviously if these two doors were moved up 8 feet, you'd want posts underneath them as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So really it's posts above and below openings. If the opening width is greater than the post space.
That would cover it.
Okay.
Yep, got it.
Yeah, where it's concerning is if your post layout was such where you would have a post 1 foot in from the left and another post 1 foot in from the right. That's the trade-off between keeping your girt layout nice versus doubling up the number of posts that you need on a job. That's where the trade-off comes in. Okay.
If you had a setting, so there is a setting for keep open wall gable posts. If there was a checkbox similar to that, where the posts above openings would remain in the layout and still behave as an on-center post, then you would have the control to do custom post placement on all of the standard posts and header posts. You would still have control of those. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, but that would mean that every time you'd have to look every time and say, hey, do I actually need 2 posts in there, or can I get away with just 1 post? And then you'd have to figure out what the post spacing would have to be. I don't know which would people rather have, or do we need an option? So, but I think so. If we had a checkbox for keep open wall gable posts, if we had keep posts gable posts above openings, which is I think what you said. And if you check that
Yes.
box, you would keep the posts above the openings at the on-center spacing.
But
if you didn't check the box, I think we still have to honor your gable post spacing at 8 feet. That means that if it's more than 8 feet from jam post to jam post, you need at least a post in between there, maybe 2.
Right.
But you'd only need 2 if it was more than 16 feet. So if it's 20 foot wide, you're going to need 2 posts in there, and we can either center them within the opening, or if you have keep posts above openings, then it would just put them at the on-center spacing. That way you have control over it. So we're talking about adding a new option for keep posts above and below openings, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I know we're not the only company using SmartBuild, so I don't know how other people do it, but we typically keep the stub posts, the header posts on gables. We keep those with the layout because we have all our trusses, something that's not, we have a package for lateral bracing on the bottom cords of the trusses. We keep those on the post spacing layout and do an X brace from top quarter truss back 8 feet to the bottom quarter of the truss. And that ties that all together, the lateral brace on the bottom cord, the X brace, and that header post are all on the same spot. So that for that
Okay, so you
reason,
need
if
to,
it's a 20-foot door and the post layout comes 3 feet off the jamb post, we would go ahead and keep that post at 3 feet off the jamb post.
okay, so you would check that box that we were just talking
I
about.
would check that box as keep layout. Yeah.
So that'd just be for the gables. Would you do something different on the eave?
It'd just be for the gables. The eaves have been behaving great because they are tied to the trusses, and that's what we would like to see.
Okay.
And
Well,
in your case where you've got a double truss carrier, obviously they're not, but
Yeah. Okay.
now on the eaves, if you raise that opening up though, you would still need the posts underneath it, right?
correct. I see now. We always do, or 95% of the time we're on 8 foot truss spacing, so we have a single ply truss carrier. But
Mhm.
if you have a 2-ply truss carrier, you're having the same thing happen on eaves as gables with
Yeah.
not having that header post in there.
Yeah. Yep. And then similarly, like we're talking about here, well, you've got a header high, so
Yeah.
header high takes care of that for you.
Was that a slider? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you turn that off, then you'll get what he's talking about. You'll have the post up above it.
Mhm.
But if you change the height, if you change the sill height of that opening and raise it up 5 feet,
Right.
don't get posts underneath it.
Yep.
I think that's what you're talking about, right, Chris?
That's right. Yep. See what happens.
10 might be a
Yeah.
little much, but
Uh, oh yeah, I forgot this was. Let's just do this. But no posts.
no posts
Yeah.
underneath it. And you're saying, Chris, you would keep the posts underneath it.
In that case, there, we might not, but if the door is wider, then that obviously we would have to have some posts under it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I always hate it when people say, well, sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't.
I want the ability to put posts there.
Yep. Lots of options.
Yeah, the problem is, how would you put posts? How would you tell the program you want posts there? Because with this option we're talking, you have the option of saying, look, I want posts above and below my openings. So keep posts above and below openings. If you do that, you're going to get posts above and below your openings. You wouldn't have the option of saying, I want posts above my openings, but not below my openings.
Correct.
That's where it gets tricky.
That's that's where somebody smarter than me's got to figure that out.
Hey, Chris is my boss, kind of. I feel like my attached building option should be more prioritized than what he's asking for.
Yeah.
Well, of
That's not
course,
the
you
first
asked
time.
first.
I let him go first.
Yeah, Delmar
Yeah,
had
a
a
couple
comment.
more. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Delmar had a comment on the posts above and below openings. He said one thing you could do is give an option for the number of posts added above opening. That's kind of what we're talking about here. But if you said I want 2 posts above my opening, then there's still the question of, okay, where do you want them? So, yeah. You had more, Chris?
I did, but I was going to say I can just send you an email. The webinar wasn't just for me, so maybe I'm the only one left.
All right. So Chris has generously yielded the floor. Anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to leave us with?
Hey guys, this is Keith. Sorry,
Hey, Keith.
I showed up late to the webinar. I had a doctor's appointment, and I'm not sure if you guys covered it all. Sounds like it's been a lengthy meeting, which is good. A lot of conversation. Just want to mention high level in case it hasn't been brought up. That in 1.86, one of our primary focuses is on doing interior wall input for barndominiums. So anyway, I know that's something that's a really high priority for most of our customers. So I just want to make people aware of that. And what would be really helpful is when we go out to beta, if people who are interested in that would go and take a look-see, and we look for feedback on that. So we're going to really keep focused on this over the next several releases, but just want to make sure everybody understands what's coming up.
To add on to that, I wouldn't mind seeing more people get onto this latest beta release, at least today, just to help find differences and bugs and things that you have questions on. If everybody's aware of how to get onto beta, I could send a link to you, or you just put beta in front of the post frame solver up in the address bar.
And the big thing there is we do a lot of testing on this, but we don't test with the settings that you have configured for your system. So we don't necessarily test with a gable wall style of gable truss and gable post material matched truss and keep open wall gable post turned off and top of eave post as top of heel rafter. We don't necessarily test with the combination of settings that you guys do, or even the kind of jobs that you guys are creating. And so the more people we can get up there and at least poke at beta, that means that it's less likely that when we do release it, you're not going to get on there and go, hey, this thing that used to work doesn't work anymore. And then we have to scramble and get it fixed. And then you're out of luck for a few hours while we get that fixed. It's much more preferable if you can catch that before we release it, because then we can get it fixed and have a nice clean release for everyone.
To add on to that, there's a little thing in testing, and with every option, there's one that's one change, right? So you go into wall framing and you only change from post frame to stud frame. Well, with all the other buttons and options, you can have up to 1 trillion combinations with the number of, with just even a small number of options, but we've got, I think it's up to 600 different options that can affect the model. So it starts getting pretty complicated to test every scenario.
And that's where the more people we can get testing the combination of options that they use, the more likely we are to catch issues that we wouldn't ordinarily catch before they affect your ability to use SmartBuild. All right, end of soapbox. Any other questions, comments from anyone?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, sir. What's up, Rafael?
So one question I have is we always frame our garage door openings 1 inch less. Our garage doors are always, if it's a 10-foot garage door, it's exactly 10 foot. So we always frame them 1 inch less. Is there a way to switch it so that on the post layout, it's always 1 inch less? It makes the openings 1 inch less.
So if you have a 10-foot garage door, you would frame a 9-foot, 11-inch opening?
Yes.
Okay.
We actually do that as well with a half-inch. We frame a half-inch under on the width and an inch less on the height. So all the overhead doors in our catalog are sized accordingly, and then it frames accordingly.
Right.
Okay. So you put in a 10 by 10 sliding 10 by 10 door. You would put it in as 9 foot and 9/11 and a half by 9/11 and a half.
9/11.
We would
Yeah,
just do 1 inch less all the way around.
Yeah.
The only thing wrong with that, my overhead doors, say a 10 by 8 door is going to be, the size of the door is going to be 9 foot 11 and a half by 9 foot by 7 foot 11, and it has to be entered in decimal feet, and then the height or the when you go to search a door in the catalog, your feet and inches, your width and or height would have to be the same decimal feet.
Yeah.
Right. So it makes it harder to search for them.
But I just search in the description. I have the width and height in the description as well. So I searched 10 by 8, and it brings up all the 10 by 8 doors.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think probably a better way to handle this would be if the 10 by 10 overhead door had a width and a height of 10 feet by 10 feet, but it also had a side overlap and a top overlap.
Sure.
And if you could set those, and then the program would still put in a 10 foot by 10 foot door, but it would frame the rough opening as less than that.
That would be a better option than what we're doing now. So, yeah.
But then what you're doing now would still work, because the default overlap would be 0. And then, but you'd be able to go back in on a door by door basis to say, let me change these to be the right answers. So make that 10 by 10 door be 10 by 10 with the right margins on it, the right overlaps, so that it comes out right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
9.9583 wide and same thing on the height, 9.91 something. To change all your door sizes to that is going to be extensive.
Right, but because you already have them in like that, if we made that change to add the lap, then you would be able to go into each of your doors and say, no, I'm going to change their sizes to be what a person thinks they are, and put the overlap in so that it's correct.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
What do you mean by overlap?
So for an overhead door, it's basically the overhead door sits inside of the building usually, right? And so the overhead door, if it's a 10-foot overhead door, each of those, and the door itself is 10 feet wide when you take it out of the package, the opening that you're going to put in there is going to be usually about a half an inch to an inch or something on either side. It's going to be less than that. That way, when the door closes, it closes up against the side of the building. Same thing at the top. The opening that you put in the wall is going to be slightly less than 10 feet, so that when that 10-foot door comes closed, it's overlapping the header at the top of that opening. And so that's what the overlap would be. It would be how far in the framing comes in from that 10 by 10 foot opening.
And where do you apply that option?
You would apply it in the door and window schedule here. So if you go over to overhead doors, Sean.
So this is a future.
These are all 10 by 10.
Future enhancement. This is not
It's
available.
a potential future enhancement. It's not available now. But you'll be able to go into this 10 by 10 door and you could say, all right, it is in fact 10 by 10, but the side overlap is a 1/2 inch and the top overlap is 1 inch. And what that would result in is your framing would frame to a 9 foot 11 inch by 9 foot 11 inch opening.
Yeah.
But the door is still 10 by 10.
So that'd be a clean way to do it in the future. I mean, for right now, it's kind of a workaround.
Right now, the only way to do it, is to figure out what 9 foot 10 inches is and put that in there. 9 foot 11 inches. You just have to put in 9.9166666667. So it's not very clean. It's not very nice.
Would it be a good option to just change that width to a real length and width? So can we put in 10 foot 3 inches, 9 foot 11 inches instead of the decimal? And we just convert it.
It would be potentially useful, but it still wouldn't help because the width is still 10. It's still 9.916667 at the end of the day, regardless of how we display it to you. And really, they want to be able to put in the width as 10 by 10 because that's the width and the height of the door. You ask someone, how big a door do you want there? They don't tell you, I want a 9 foot 11 by 9 foot, 8 foot 11 and a half. They tell you they want a 10 foot by 9 foot door. But anyway, so the workaround right now is if you want the framing to actually be for a slightly smaller opening, you have to put the framing width and height into this number. Same thing applies to windows. If you want a 3.0 window, that's 3 feet wide and 3 feet high, but the rough opening has to be, 3'1" by 3 foot 1 1/4 or something like that, in order for the window to fit in there and have room for your shims to get it lined up correctly and all that stuff. So we could either have the width and height and then have 2 more entries for left lap and top lap, or side lap and top lap, or we could have width and height and then rough opening width and rough opening height. And that's where you would put those funky numbers.
Rough opening width and height, or could it just be called a framing margin? Framing margin for width and same thing for height. You just put a 1/2 inch or -1/2 or whatever.
Yeah, we could do that as well. I mean, what would make more sense for how people are going to use it is always the question. So when you're putting in this 10 foot by 10 foot door, what is it that you know about that door? You probably don't know that it's 9 foot 11.5 inches wide. You know that it's got a 1/4 inch margin on each side and a 1 inch margin at the top, or overlap, or whatever you want to call it. There's a 1 inch difference at the top. So your framing is 1 inch lower than 10 feet. And if that's the information that you have for doors and windows, then that would make sense that that's what we would ask you in the software. It would also make it much easier when you're dealing with it, because you can then download your entire list of overhead doors and then just set the left and right, or the left, right, and top margins to be a 1/2 inch and 1 inch for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just set it right down the row and then upload that file back into SmartBuild.
Yeah.
And then again, I think there's a different problem with sliders. There's a different problem with windows and walk doors. For windows and walk doors, generally will have a positive margin, if you will. Generally, the rough opening is wider than the door for a window or a walk door. For an overhead door, the rough opening is generally smaller than the door.
So as it is now, the sliding door does have a side margin, and that does not change the framing. It changes the size of the panel. So
That's
we
right.
definitely, it would have to behave just the opposite.
Yes, the margins for overheads, walk doors, and openings would change the framing rather than that.
Right.
Because for a slider, the way that sliders work right now, if you say I've got a 10-foot wide slider, it's going to give you a 10-foot wide opening. And then if you've got a 1/2 inch margin, it's going to give you a 10-foot 1 inch panel to sit over that. So let me ask, is that how sliders should work?
I would say yes.
So a 10-foot slider means the rough opening is 10 feet wide, and the slider is a little bit bigger than that based on my setting.
Right.
For an overhead door, a 10-foot overhead door is 10 feet wide, and the rough opening is a little bit smaller than 10 feet. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Okay. Well, this will hopefully will release this evening, but next few days this will be out, and we'll do this again in a few weeks with interior walls. So thank you, everybody.